Use these 10 science-backed nutrition principles to optimize your diet, achieve a healthy weight, and stand a good chance of living a long time.
Welcome to the Awesome Human Podcast, your path to total human optimization. Ready to unleash your 100%? Let's go.
Welcome back to the Awesome Human Podcast. Hello, I'm your host, Ben Coomber, and it's probably long overdue that I did a deep nutrition podcast on all the things that you can do to optimize your health, your performance based on science. Now, of course, as ever, I'm going to mix in some anecdotes and personal experience, what I've explored on a personal level, what I've done with clients over the years. And I suppose it feels overdue because nutrition was always my primary skill set. If you kind of look at my years in industry, what I've done professionally, it has been primarily as a nutritionist, working with thousands of clients, teaching people, teaching coaches, developing curriculums for nutrition education. So let's get stuck into nutrition. Now, these 10 principles I've tried to boil down into kind of the macro picture. So if you were only going to kind of have on your hands, let's look at your hands and the 10 fingers you've got. If we were to look at 10 principles, this is what I've tried to boil it down to. Now, I hope that you would have heard of a good handful of these, and that's a good thing. Don't listen to that thinking, oh, this podcast hasn't given me, that much value because I already know that. No, take that as comfort, take that as confirmation. And I say that because in a world of social media, in a world where we're always consuming information, sometimes it is good to hear that we are just doing the right thing, and we don't need to always continually search for more answers. Now, of course, we want to evolve, we want to grow, we want to learn new things, we want to do things better, but hopefully 80% of what we do in our week, in our month, is pretty grounded in solid principles that are gonna, lead to you being healthy over time. And of course, it's that 10-20% that we're hopefully dialing in. Now, if you don't feel you're kind of at 80%, I would implore you to try and get there, because the beauty is in a lot of the mundane. Like and I won't call it mundane because it's beautiful once you become fully invested in it. But when you think about health, I do see it as quite a simple picture that we need to sleep well, we need to hydrate properly, we need to eat real food, we need to move, we need to keep strengthening our body, we need to have a positive mindset. Like all of that stuff is so important, and we can't continue to emphasize the value of just getting that right as much as possible every day. And I say as much as possible because it's really important to give yourself slack where appropriate when you can't achieve that. Like I've just been ill and I did my first really small workout yesterday, and I did a bike ride on the weekend as well after 7 weeks. And like in that process, I gave myself a huge amount of slack. I said, hey, you're not in a position to do that stuff at the moment. It's not right for you. It's not right for your journey, where your body's at. Just let it go. I've been a parent for a while, and when you're a parent of young kids, like it can be challenging. It can be challenging when your kids are older, like in all life stages. You might be going for a rough time at work. You might be caring for people. Who knows? It's really important to give yourself slack, and to know that with the time that you have, you're doing what you can. And as long as you can honour that, as long as you can say, hand on heart, I'm doing what I can to look after myself, and I just need to wait and be patient for this time to blow over, then that is good. Like that's all we can do as humans. So I think that's really important. So nutrition. The reason why I think nutrition is so powerful is, think about it. Nutrition is the energy blocks that we put physically into our body. So we eat, and then our body has to extract all the things that we need to thrive on a physical, energetic mitochondria level from that food. And that's why it's, excuse me, hay fever. Ooh, that's why it's so important. So the types of foods that we eat are very important. How much food we eat is very important. The regularity of when we eat is pretty important, because when you get low blood sugar, you don't perform very well. So this is really important, and that's why I believe that in a huge amount of my career, I focus so much on nutrition, because I've placed a huge amount of value in what it can physically bring to the body. Like, I know, and you know, if you're not eating well, you're not performing at your peak. Your weight isn't as good as it is. Your vitality isn't as strong as it should be and could be. So we need to honour the power of food. And when we often look at longevity science, we look at the blue zones, a huge amount of focus is put on the food that these people eat. And if you've not watched I think it's called How to Live to 100 on Netflix, it's actually a really good documentary. I really enjoyed it. And food quality, food amount, stress reduction, movement, nature, and connection were the big takeaways from that documentary. So we can see the power of food, we can see the power of a natural lifestyle, which I would argue our modern world is moving us further and further away. And this is why I think there's huge value in nutrition. And I hope this is where this podcast can deliver huge value for you. So I'm going to go through these 10 points kind of in order of importance, but you kind of unpack this how you will. Either way, these are the 10 points with science backing that I feel could really ground you in really nailing your nutrition for health now and health in the future. So number one is calories. We cannot avoid the fact that our body has a caloric requirement every day. You'll see arguments online all the time about food this, diet that, but the reality is they all control calories. And when people sort of say stuff like, oh, calories don't matter, or it's more than that, yes, it is more than that. It is a bigger picture, but it comes down to that energetic equation. We know that scientifically. It's been heavily researched. And I always have a counter argument for people that say it's not about that. It's like, literally, show me the data. Show me the data that calories don't count. I'm not saying that there are other things that are not important. There are. Food timing is important. Food quality is important. How your body responds to the food that you eat. So food sensitivities, they're all important, and they will all impact how we respond to food and our behavior around food, but it's still a calorie equation. And the problem is if we don't spend time learning what our body needs, it becomes a big struggle. When I think about the current problems for a lot of people in my age demographic, for example, like 30s, 40s, 50s, it's a big lifestyle phase of your life. You know, you're quite often using the weekend around food. Like, I've got kids, we see other families, you're quite often cooking, you're going for barbecues, you're having meals and stuff. And that is a perfect breeding ground for overeating. You go around someone's house, they've ordered a curry in or whatever. That could be a hugely calorific meal. Now, you do that twice on a weekend, and that can, quote unquote, kind of ruin progress or make you put on weight because of that heightened calorie intake at the weekend. And not knowing how to manage that is going to make it really hard for you to manage your weight, because there's not enough awareness put into how that impacts your overall weight. And so many people are eating and doing great things Monday to Friday all throughout the week. Then it gets to the weekend, we relax anything. And I'm not saying don't relax. I'm not saying don't enjoy food. Do all of that, but have boundaries in place. Like, I count my calories every day loosely. I don't do it using an app. I just do it using my iPhone calculator. So literally, if I have breakfast, my breakfast 700 calories, I just put 700 in my calculator. Now, I get that it's easy for me because I know a lot about calories, but I've only got to that point by investing time into understanding calories so that I can be at that level. And that's why I think nutrition is a massive life skill, because most people will perpetually say they are on a diet. Well, there's a solution to that. Understand food so that you're not perpetually on a diet, that you can manage your weight and you can enjoy yourself. Now, there are caveats to that. It is harder for some people. Like, for example, If you're a smaller person of lower body weight, I always think about I'm 83-ish kilos. If I went out for dinner with someone who is 62 kilos, they have to have a lot less food than me. And if a burger comes out and that burger's 1,400 calories as a meal, that's more than half of that other person's daily calorie need in one meal. Whereas opposed to mine, it's less than half of my daily calorie intake. So it makes it so much easier to manage your nutrition. My point here is please understand the value of calories. I know you see it around the internet all the time, but practically, what are you actually doing in your daily life to allow that to be an empowering part of your nutrition? Do you have a process in your daily, weekly life that allows you to understand how many calories your body needs? Now, this is made a lot easier if you eat real food. When we eat real food, there's usually more satiety, you feel, fuller for longer, you feel good, you feel energized, there's more nutrition in the food, calorie for calorie. And a lot of people, you will hear people say, I just eat real food and I maintain my weight. That's awesome. If that's your framework, then it's absolutely amazing. But for people that might go a bit more relaxed, whatever that means, you still need a framework to bring control into that. Otherwise, you're going to be upset because you're now putting yourself in a hypercaloric environment. So there's loads of tools that you can use, but ultimately education is the first step. Simply engaging in calorie tracking so you can understand your food, so that when you eat, you're empowered to say, this is what I need for my body, whether it's a singular meal, meals over the course of a day, or meals over the course of a week. I, for one, take huge amounts of happiness in maintaining my weight. I really enjoy it. I've been 82, 83 kilos for about 15 years. I like it. I like being a stable weight. It makes me feel happy, my clothes always fit, I feel comfortable, I feel confident, yada, yada, yada. So I place huge amounts of value in it, and I've educated myself around it so that I can be empowered to manage my weight. So that's number one, calories are king. Number two, when we look at the diets that have shown the most success in research, it always comes to the top of the Mediterranean diet. Now, the reason I would suppose this is, and I've read the research around this, is purely because of nutrient density. When you look at a European diet, it's quite often has a really nice amount of lean proteins, oily fish, lots of fruits and vegetables, pulses, freshly made bread. Don't know about you, but when you go to Europe and you eat freshly made bread that you eat on the day, it has such a better energy response in you compared to the bread that we eat from the supermarket with all the crap in it that allows it to sit in our cupboard for 2 weeks. So I think nutrient quality is the main thing here. So it's not necessarily about eat Mediterranean. It's like, what can we learn from that framework? It's like going back to that How to Live to Your 100 documentary on Netflix. The commonality between all of these groups that they studied was nutrient quality. Whether you went to Africa, Indonesia, the Antarctic, Asia, everyone was eating really good quality, wholesome food that, always had a protein source at each meal, always had fruits or vegetables in it, was always having a, really nice kind of, quite often kind of grain, whether that's bean or bulgur or whatever. So I think the lesson here is nutrient density. So when you look at your diet, are you optimizing or maximizing the nutrient density that you ingest from the calories that you consume? And if not, you could argue that if you were to improve that, you would probably experience more vitality because you're just giving your body more micronutrients, more fibers, more antioxidants, more polyphenols, etc., etc. Now within that, I think there's a couple of nuances here. I think another reason, if we were to look at singular nutrients, Mediterranean diet is so prolific in the research, is that it focuses a lot on omega-3 fats and monounsaturated fats. Now, unsaturates and saturates are not bad. The issue is the balance. Nothing is really bad apart from trans fats. We know that. And they're the fats that you would consume from kind of largely processed food, really. Now, when we look at omega-3 fats, we're largely looking at their anti-inflammatory effects. So you'll hear people say, oh, seed oils are bad. No, seed oils aren't bad per se. It's the balance in our diets. If you are using or consuming a lot of seed oils, it will often be at the expense of consuming a lot of really healthful omega-3 and monounsaturated and saturated fats. So, like, I was having an argument with a couple of people on social media this week after I talked about oat milk, and people talked about the sunflower content of oat milk, and I said, respectfully, the oat milk that I'm referencing here is 1 to 2% sunflower oil. If you put that in the context of a wider diet where people are eating a lot of really nice, healthful, whole fats, then it's literally a drop in the ocean. So people can shout at me, yeah, but seed oils are pro-inflammatory. But I'm like, whoa, you need to look at context. And so much of nutrition is contextual. What are we talking about here? Why are we talking about it? What's the context? You can't, I could snapshot one of my meals on social media and you could say, oh, but that could be better. It could be this. And I'm like, whoa, we need to view it in the wider context. What have I eaten over the course of the day? What am I going to eat over the course of a week? What does my nutrition look like as a whole? And that's one of the huge plus points, I think, of the Mediterranean diet, the focus on getting the balance right with healthy fats alongside huge nutritional density and a consistent array of lean proteins. There's usually some kind of lean protein at every meal, and I would argue it's actually a little bit inefficient, and that is my fifth point. Third point. So let's go into my third point now. My third point around nutrition optimization, looking at science, is protein. Now, if you were to structure a key macronutrient as a focal point in your nutrition, it would be protein. We know from the research, even now on more recent stuff that's been done, that the current protein recommendations by the government are too low. So that is currently set at 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. That's not enough. We now think in the research that's 1 to 1.2 grams, which generally is the recommendation for people doing light physical activity, and then that increases to 1.4, 1.6, 1.8 depending on the volume of activity that you're doing. I would personally try and recommend that everyone is having 1.2, if not 1.4, 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. You're always, in my experience, going to have more satiety. You're always going to just feel like you've got more consistent energy because it's going to slow down the release of blood sugar into your system, regardless of the other macronutrients that you've eaten. And you're also going to provide ample building block material, proteins, amino acids to your tissues. So when I look at my diet and I said to you, well, I'm pretty loose with counting calories, I just kind of put the meal into my calculator and calculate that meal. Within that, there's a framework. So while I do that per meal from a calorie basis, what I then go and do is I take my kind of framework of what an individual need should be for a meal and put that into my calories. So when I think about a meal, I'm like, right, protein. What protein am I eating? Every meal that I eat is focused around protein, whether that's eggs, salmon, tofu, beans, like whatever it is. And then the next thing I'm thinking is nutrition. How I'm making this nutritional, as nutritious as possible. I'm feeling a bit bunged up, so like when I'm thinking of my words, sometimes they're a bit like, meh. So I'm then thinking fruit. I'm thinking vegetables. I'm thinking pulses. What grains can I be consuming? And I generally will have a lower carb, higher fat diet. That seems to work for me. So when you think about your nutrition, think of calories, think of protein, think of nutritional density, and you're already onto a winner. And that brings me on to my fourth point, the ratio of carbohydrates and fats. Now, this kind of stokes a big fire in the world of nutrition, of whether you should be high fat, low fat, moderate fat, same with carbs. And the reality is both of these macronutrients are needed and useful. If you exclude one of those macronutrients, you're at risk of suffering from nutritional deficiencies. You're also at risk of not having a balanced blood glucose level. Now, we can argue that carbohydrates are the least needed macronutrient in our diet. And I would argue that you don't need to have a high carbohydrate diet to feel good, fuel yourself, and be have nutritional sufficiency or be optimal, because there's a huge amount of sources of carbohydrates that are very high in nutrition but low in overall carbohydrates. So if you think about green vegetables, for example, you can eat a ton of broccoli, get loads of fiber, loads of micronutrition, but have a low overall carbohydrate and calorie intake. So that allows us to really boost nutritional intake without boosting or putting carb intake too much. So when I've always worked with clients on this, I'll say, like, look, we need to eat a bare minimum of 25% of your diet is fat, ideally 30, maybe 35%, because hormonally we need a good amount of fat to provide the building blocks for our hormones. Also, going any lower, you're probably really going to struggle to have good, even, balanced energy levels. And then after that, there's just the nutritional component that healthy fats are really important nutritionally for the body. So after that point, I then say to people, hey, just experiment. Every meal you eat, think about the protein, carbohydrate, and fat content of that meal. And then think about your energy response after it. So there are many meals that you might eat that are healthful. For example, I could have 2 boiled eggs and then make some porridge with chopped banana on top and a little bit of flaxseed. That's probably low to moderate protein, fairly moderate fat, but pretty high carb. Now let's change that, and let's say I ate 6 boiled eggs, 1 banana, and a very small handful of Brazil nuts. That's now a high protein, high fat, pretty low carb meal. Now my energy response is the important thing to look out for after that meal. If I felt better after one of those particular meals, whether it was the higher carb meal or the lower carb meal, that's where I would then want to lean most of my meals towards. So for example, I'm the guy that would much prefer having 6 boiled eggs, a banana, and a handful of Brazil nuts for breakfast. My energy would be way more consistent. I'd feel fuller for longer. And what I find is when I'm approaching my next meal, that hunger that I start to feel is slow and gradual and calm. Whereas if I had the other meal, I find that approach to hunger is quite aggressive. Like, it really creeps up on me, and I find that within the space of like 20 minutes to 30 minutes, I've gone from feeling a little bit hungry to so hungry I could eat someone's arm. And that's what we're observing there, is the drop off of blood glucose. It's gone up so high that the peak, you kind of feel that kind of drop, that kind of dip in the blood glucose. And that's all I mean by my comment here of optimizing your carb and fat intake. It's us looking at our meals and still keeping them healthy, but optimizing for our energy response, while also not letting our fat intake drop too low that we don't provide the real materials that our body needs to thrive. Number 5, and I'm going to stop after number 5 and make this a 2-part podcast, because as ever, I talk too much. Number 5 is electrolytes or hydration. So hydration is very important. In general, if you were going to look at a figure to put to this, you want to drink 30 mils of fluid per kilogram of body weight. So I think for my body weight, pig maths standing here off the top of my head, it's about 2.6 to 2.8, I think, ish, litres of water per day. Now within that, we will then want to add fluid for the exercise that we do. So if I go and do a workout, you're probably looking at adding an extra 500 to 800, maybe even 1,000 millilitres of water for that hour of exercise. If you're sweating outside, you might, take in even more because the sweat rate was even higher. And after, additional to that is the electrolytes in it. So traditionally we would have drunk water from like streams and lakes and rivers and whatnot. And that is mineralized water. We have water that comes in, off the mountains, it's going through rocks, blah, 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 and it picks up all the minerals from the rocks and stuff, and we end up drinking mineralized water. It's got calcium, it's got magnesium, it's got phosphorus, but many of us drink tap water now. So as you can see online, I've seen it, the proliferation of hydration products has been huge this year. We've even seen it as a supplement company. Our hydration sales have gone up a lot, not just because it's summer, but they've gone up because the awareness that people are now seeing around electrolytes in water is so important. So for me, a bare minimum of water intake is filtering your water, and then once you filter your water, putting electrolytes in it so your body can optimally absorb it. Your body needs more fluid if it does not have electrolytes in it, because what your body will do will start to, if it doesn't have electrolytes in it, in the water, it will start to strip them as it passes through. And you'll find you'll go to the toilet a little bit more because the water is passing through your body more. So that electrolyte has a charge on it, and it's used by the cell to pull the fluid in to the cell. So it's very important. So filter your water, get all the crap out of it from our modern day tap water, and then either put a little pinch of sea salt in it, or you might have a mineralization system at home in your water filter, or you can add like powdered electrolytes like Awesome Hydrate. So, quite often if people are drinking tap water, I'll say to people, look, have like half a scoop of Awesome Hydrate when you hydrate in the morning, and then you could probably get away with having a fair bit of tap water during the day, and then when you exercise, take on board more electrolytes. But ideally you will have a low amount of minerals in all the water that you drink, because it will help you hydrate the cell even more. So I'm going to end there. Those are my 5 things, and I'm going to cover the next 5 things in a part 2 episode probably next week. So we've been over number 1, calories are king. Number 2, the Mediterranean diet, aka getting real nutritional density and getting that focus around really high quality fats and fat balance right. Number 3 is making sure your diet is high protein, way above the current government recommendations. So ideally 1.2, 1.4, 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. If you want to do any maths of this, if you would like a calorie calculator, go to www.awesomesupplements.co.uk, scroll right down to the bottom, and at the bottom there's a button you can use a calorie calculator. I'll then talk you through like how to use it, what happens next. There's a little video on screen and stuff, and that maybe will be an empowering process for you with counting calories. Number 4, we're looking at our carbohydrate and fat intake and optimizing it based on the energy response that we get from a meal. And then number 5 is optimizing your hydration and making sure you're consuming electrolytes. Now, building on this today, if you would like a blueprint of how to eat better, sleep better, move better, and optimize your physiology, if you've not yet downloaded the Awesome Human Blueprint, which is a new 26-page ebook that I've written to help people optimize their day and their week based on science and experience of eating, moving, sleeping, hormones, and central nervous system, then click on the link somewhere in the description of this podcast or video. Then you can download that. It's 100% free. Otherwise, thank you for listening. Be an awesome human. I'll see you on the next episode.